they need to look at why they would want to keep Ayuk,
right,
and then commit to that.
Yeah.
You're saying, okay, you want him to be the focal point of your offense, fine. You want Brock Purdy to be your quarterback for the franchise going forward,
Fine.
Then commit to that by investing in the offensive line, re-signing Ayuk, and doing what you can to keep developing Purdy. That would be the aligned strategy. But what the Niners tend to do is just be committed to process. And so the process would be, well, we're going to string out our contract talks with Ayuk.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to eventually sign him. We're not going to commit that much to the offensive line. We'll just have people compete for jobs, and we'll go forward. It's aimless. It's aimless.
We'll do what we do.
Yeah.
Because it's generated so many Super Bowl titles.
Exactly.
Seriously.
Yeah. Well, it generates appearances, and that's what Jed York wants.
Yeah.
Is constant contention, and that's the formula for money.
I agree. And that's why, like, when I have these debates with people on YouTube or on Twitter, and people are adamant that you have to pay Ayuk, you have to pay Purdy. Sure. But why are you investing so much money in your passing game when you aren't a passing team? Like, you pass less than every other team in the league. And when you do and make those kind of investments in the passing game, you need, like, that means you're taking investments from other places, and you have to be able to lean on the passing game to win. Which means some weeks you might have to throw the ball 45 times and win, 50 times and win.
Yeah.
That's not how the Niners play.
No.
Ever.
No, Kyle doesn't do that.
No.
And so, it reverts to process. It's what Kyle is comfortable doing, which is following his father's blueprint.
Running the ball, being balanced, and passing the ball as little as possible. If they could run the ball 40 times in a game, they would. They averaged 30 passes a game last year. Why are you going to be throwing $27 million a year at a wide receiver or $55 million a year at a quarterback when that's the offense you want? I think a lot of fans assume, like, oh, well, in a couple of years with this quarterback and this wide receiver, it's going to be a totally different offense. They're going to be top 10 in passing. Really? Why? What about the Shanahans make you think they're ever going to evolve?
There's no evidence of that at all.
Nice.
Just there is one blueprint, and that stays the blueprint.
Mm-hmm.
And the question becomes is, can Kyle evolve, or can the organization make him evolve?
Yeah.
And Jed is not in a position or wants to make Kyle evolve. He's happy with the money that comes in. He doesn't want to touch Kyle as a result. Kyle has all the power in the organization. No one can tell him no. And so the only change comes from Kyle seeing the need to change and evolve. But Kyle doesn't evolve on offensive line, cap strategy, situational coaching, all the elements that fall into why they don't win titles.
Mike Shanahan was the Broncos offensive coordinator from 85 to 87, and then their quarterback coach from 89 to 90, and then their offensive coordinator again in 91, and then their head coach from 95 to 2008. So he was with John Elway for quite a long time. And he never won a Super Bowl until he got Terrell Davis and ran the hell out of the ball. And the first time they won a Super Bowl, John Elway completed 12 passes. These are the Shanahans. They don't have a sophisticated drop back passing scheme. They're about running the ball with outside zone and play action passes off of that. Their offensive line is built for zone blocking in particular. That's just what they're always going to be. It's what they've always been. And I think if you know the Shanahans, and then you understand why maybe Kyle should be or is a little hesitant to hand out huge contracts to people that are just in the passing game. Look at Debo and Kittle. Those two got big extensions, but they're both highly involved in the running game. Kittle as a blocker, Debo as a ball carrier. Ayuk isn't. Purdy isn't.
Ayuk is to a degree in that he sets those key blocks that can free McCaffrey.
He does down the field. It's true.
But those are highlight plays. They're not constant play calls.
Mm-mm.
And so Ayuk contributes. Ayuk certainly brings value as a blocker, no question.
He does. That's true. But like wide receiver blocking can only affect so much. It's not like tight end blocking at the point of attack.
Right.
Yeah.
It's nowhere near in terms of the usage rate as a blocker.
Right.
It is not what you're doing with Ayuk. But you're still trying to leverage his ability to do that.
Yes.
And so it still contributes. And that's how Kyle could possibly justify it, is to say that, well, I need Ayuk in terms of his
Or his
overall
blocking.
skill set
Yeah.
for his blocking in addition to everything else. Is
Right.
that Kyle can sell himself on, I need Ayuk given what I do. But for Ayuk, you're not optimizing what he does. You're not using him down the field the way you should. It's not an optimal situation for Brandon at all. He's much better off going someplace else because he could be a dominant receiver elsewhere. But I still think that Kyle is going to, via process, say that, we want to keep Ayuk.
Yeah, if I were Ayuk's agent, I think I'd want him on another team because I would understand what the reality is with the Niners. They could pay him, but they're never going to really feature him the way a lot of other teams would, and that will affect his next contract and his overall career. And so,
Sure.
it'd be one thing if the Niners won a Super Bowl, so they could say like, you got to stay here. You could be part of something really special, a dynasty, but they didn't. And the question is why. And I wonder if certain players on this team are starting to look at the head coach as the reason why. Because last year it seemed like the team was as good as it could possibly be. Is the team better on paper now than it was last year? I don't know about that.
Not yet. We have to see what plays out in the draft and then figure out where they are. But relatively speaking, I just look at this team and say they had their chance and blew it. It's the death by 1,000 cuts in the latest Super Bowl. That you can take 20 plays and say this is why they lost. If you take 3 of those out, they can win. And that's how close the margin was. It's if Greenlaw doesn't get hurt, if Ray doesn't try to pick up the ball, means
if McCaffrey doesn't fumble, if George doesn't say hi George, if Kyle knew the rules,
but the
if they went for it on 4th down once or twice.
But how many of those ifs are then attributed to Kyle not being a good situational coach?
Most of them.
Yeah. As your dad has pointed out, Bill Walsh would tell his team, if there's a loose ball on a punt, fall on it. Do not try to pick it up.
Don't be a hero. Yeah. Be a team player.
And that's part of the difference, is that here's one that pays attention to the granular details in situational coaching, and here's one that blows it off. And that's why one wins and one loses.
That's a great point. I would agree.